On the record now, this is Marcus Widener. It's December 19th, and I'm interviewing Rachel Dennis, who's a member and activist in SEIU 49. And Rachel, tell me your name, the community where you currently live, where you were born, and what year you were born.
So my name is Rachel Dennis, Racheldennis, just in case you need to get the spelling. Um, I currently live in the Gateway area in Springfield.
Mm-hmm.
And I was born at the Eugene Sacred Heart, actually,
Oh,
um,
okay.
in 1990.
Okay. And tell us about your job and the industry that you're currently employed in. Who do you work for and what do you do?
So I work at Sacred Heart at Riverbend over here. Um, I work as a monitor technician. So what I do is I watch heart rhythms, and
Hmm.
I look to see how things look different from your normal rhythm, and if things get not so good looking, if you start to have a heart attack or do, other things that aren't so great, I call the nurses, get a hold of them, and then they take care of the whatever the issue is.
Right.
So.
So you work all over the hospital or just in the cardiac care unit or
So I work, so we have one central location,
hmm.
where we actually pipe in, like all of our data comes in from people will wear these little boxes,
Yeah.
um, transmits the data um to our room, and we actually
Oh,
watch,
okay. Uh-huh.
yeah. So we
So you're
have,
monitoring a lot of people in from
yes,
a like a control center. Oh, okay.
yeah, I can
That's
watch up to
interesting.
50 people. So.
Yeah. And so that would be you EKGs or not EKGs, the actual lifetime monitoring of people's heart behavior.
Yeah. Yep.
And so they might be in all sections of the hospital.
Yes, we actually can watch, we have patients clear over in Florence and in Cottage Grove as
Oh,
well.
okay. So it's long distance. Okay.
Yeah, it's the
Wow,
entire
that is
Oregon
so
network.
interesting. And
Uh,
so how long has it been like that? How long has that technology have we had the capability to monitor somebody in Florence from?
Oh, I don't I don't know about that part. I would assume it's been a long time, but,
Yeah.
so Florence and Cottage Grove were previously monitoring their own telemetry,
Hmm. Right.
um, but, I know that, the university hospital that we have here,
Hmm.
we've been monitoring them from River Bend for years.
Uh-huh.
Um, it's been a while, longer than I've been working in this.
Yeah. And so is it just you working there, or do you have other people working with you?
I have generally 3 other monitor techs working with me at a time. So
Uh-huh.
we have 3 people who are actually watching the heart rhythms, and then a lead person who like does our breaks, runs boxes, makes sure we
Right.
don't lose the telemetry boxes, that kind of stuff.
Right.
Um, so generally we will watch. Our numbers have been fluctuating with COVID, but we were getting, 120 to 130. I think that's where we're sitting right about now as patients throughout our Oregon area.
Hmm. Has that number changed over time, or has it gone up or down, or
So when we were like in like the very heat of COVID, our numbers went down considerably. But they're starting to pick back up. So we're getting more patients that we're watching. So
right, right.
yeah.
And so what prompted you to go into this type of work?
So my whole family has been in healthcare. My sister is Lori Quinn, who is also a e-board activist, a whole 9 yards.
Hmm.
She's been there for 10 years. And then our mother, Marilyn, has been working at the hospital for almost 32 years.
Wow.
So yeah, she started in April of 91. Um, and our dad, like she's still working there. Our dad, he unfortunately became disabled, but he was working there before that. So we have a long history of working both in Peace Health
Right.
and just like healthcare and Peace Health specifically. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And so do you do similar jobs? Are you all techs, or some of you also, is your
All
mom a nurse, or
different.
what? All sorts of things?
Yeah, my mother works doing our supplies.
Uh-huh.
So she
Okay.
is the nighttime person who, if you need a supply urgently, you have someone that had got admitted, you need, certain things, then you would call her and she would go and get it and, either bring it to you or leave it in an area where you could get it easily. Takes care of the beds, all that stuff. And then my sister works in environmental services. So
Uh-huh. Yeah.
yeah, she's one of the people who cleans and makes
Yeah.
sure that we don't get too
Yeah.
dirty. So
The important part of the hospital that most people don't pay attention to or don't
exactly.
see as much, but so important. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Very interesting. So I'm gonna go off script a little bit and follow
Yep.
this rather than ask my next question. It sounds like, so your mom was at Sacred Heart for 32 years. It
Mhm.
sounds like in your family, there was sort of people said, "Oh, go work at Sacred Heart because it's a good place to work."
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
yeah. And how were you trained for your job? How did you
So
learn
my
it?
job, originally you had to have a CNA,
Hmm.
you had to be a nurse's aide and you had to work on certain floors to get trained. So I am part of the older group of people who worked on a cardiac floor
Hmm.
as a CNA, saw the telemetry, thought it was pretty cool. And my best friend actually also works there, and she was like, "Hey, you're the kind of person who would do really well at this. You should try this." So I
Hmm.
was like, "Okay." So I took there's a class that you take, and then it's a lot of on the job training.
Hmm.
So the class kind of shows you, here's what your standard heart looks like, what,
Hmm.
your regular person is going to look like. And
Hmm.
then here's the different variations that you can
Right.
get. So here's when things go wrong, basically.
Yeah. And so you pursued a very specialized training in that technology and that job as opposed to being a CNA first and then going off towards the specialty. And that's would you say that that's a common path these days in healthcare? Is that more specialized niche jobs like this?
Um, I mean, in some areas, so people will generally find their they'll find their niche for sure. So
Hmm.
like we have different floors which cater to different patient populations depending
Right.
on, you know, what happened. So we have an area where obviously all of our open heart surgeries go to a specific floor. All of our neuro like neurological, like your strokes or people
Hmm.
who have had traumatic brain injuries, all that kind of stuff, they all go to a specific floor.
Hmm.
So in that way, people kind of like specialize in like, they know the patient population that they have.
Hmm.
So, you know, if you take someone from neuro, like they're really comfortable with all of the different neuro things and
Hmm.
the weird drains coming out of different areas. If you take them and you put them on the cardiac floor where you have open
Hmm.
hearts, they are very like, I do not know this.
Yeah. Right.
Like I will do what I can, but I do not know this. This is not my specialty. What can I touch? What can't I touch? Kind of a
Hmm.
thing, because there are differences in like what you can and can't touch throughout the different floors.
Right.
So,
And so, did you learn the job on the job, or did you take classes at LCC, or where was the training done that you had?
So Peace Health actually provided my training. It was a 1 day class, and then there was an advanced class that I've taken. That's another 1 day, and then it's a lot of on the job training. Um, so I sat with another monitor tech who would explain, like, okay, here's how we do the job, and then
Hmm.
like also kind of help you understand a little bit more about the rhythms. I'd say
Right.
probably the biggest hurdle for people when they're like first doing my job is understanding that, like, yes, you've learned what a perfect sinus rhythm looks like, but here is four different people who are all in sinus rhythm and they're all doing, like, this is all normal, but it
Hmm.
looks different.
Hmm.
There's like subtle changes because every person, every heart is different.
Yeah.
So kind of like understanding that and like getting people to understand that portion,
Right.
that can be tricky.
Yeah. And so, why don't you describe to me in some detail? You talked a little bit about the work, but what is your work day? What does a typical work day look like for you? What does a shift look like?
So generally I come in, I work our evening shift, which I come in at 3 p.m.
Hmm.
Um, and I will get report from the day shift. So we'll have certain stations which are set up with certain patient populations. So I came from the area where we had the open heart surgeries. We had our so we were watching those patients. We would watch neurology patients and sometimes pediatric patients. Um, so I would come in, I would go to whatever station I was going to go to for the day, and I
Is
would
the station basically a computer monitor?
yeah.
Yeah.
So we have four um like big screens set up. So one, two, three, four.
Uh-huh.
Um, and then all of our patients are lined up on there.
Right.
So
So you'll have the name of a patient and some description of their status, or some notes on what you should be watching for, or it's basically a database of what's going
yeah,
on with them. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, well, kind of. We'll have the patient name, the room number, and then their actual like what their heart is doing. So we'll have
Hmm.
like the green lines that show
Yeah.
the rhythm.
Well, right.
Um, and then we keep all of our notes and that kind of stuff actually on a piece of paper.
Hmm.
Healthcare, we're working on it, but we're not 100% to where, so we have,
Yeah, well, I know about being a patient. I know about the problem from that end, but I always think, oh boy, for the people who work there, what a nightmare. My
yeah,
my last doctor, you could just tell that she was just like at the end of her rope trying. She was a great doctor, but trying to enter the electronic records
mhm.
era was not easy.
Oh yeah,
So,
oh yeah. I remember we've transitioned the computer system that we would chart on a few different times in the 9 years that I've been here, and it's always a big like we'll have like one night where you don't get anything. Like
mhm.
you are basically not running blind, but like you are old school paper charting, as there's people in another building who are like doing all this stuff to like transfer all of the patient data over, and it's like y'all must be just like like you see in like the movies or whatever, and we're over here just like, yes, you can have that med today.
Yeah. Right, right,
So
right. But so you're involved in the transition, but it's a slow process. Is it getting easier?
um I mean, I don't know that we are going to transition from our stuff being off of paper to
Yeah.
that.
So
I
your
don't-
notes go to somebody who transcribes them, basically.
our not really actually. They all go into, we have part of the room that we have is actually storage for all of the different stuff that we've done.
Wow. Yeah.
So luckily we
Yeah.
don't have to look through those if we ever need it. Someone else gets
Yeah.
to do that. So
Right. So you come when you go on the shift, you review
Mhm.
what was happening on the last shift, and you review the different stations you're responsible for,
Mhm.
and then what would you be doing?
So then I'll sit down, I'll make a note of how fast the patient's going and then whatever their rhythm is.
Hmm.
So if this person is in sinus rhythm, if they're in AFib, if they're having a lot of PVCs, any other like cardiac related things that I can see, I'll write down on my paper and I'll just keep watching them, throughout the day. And we'll have our computer system is set up to alarm if something happens that it thinks isn't right.
Right.
So, so if
So
you
you don't have to spot a spike, a bad spike in somebody's heart. There'll be something that'll go off that'll call your attention to it. Yeah.
yeah.
And what happens if that? What? Let's use the person who's in Florence, who's not in the hospital.
Mhm.
Uh, the person in Florence is maybe somebody who's had heart surgery but needs a monitor because they to see how they're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, what happens if something bad happens on their chart?
So what I would do is I would see it, I would note it down on my paper, and then I would call over to Florence, generally try to get a hold of their charge nurse and say, hey, your patient in room 8 is up in the 160s. They're sustaining up there.
Right.
Um, go ahead, like you should go and check on them. And
Right.
then they'll go and they'll actually see, what the patient's doing is the patient walking around, and that's why
Right.
they're doing that. And then, they'll call me back and be like, "Hey, patient's walking around, you know, give it like
So
10."
they're
And
false
then,
alarms sometimes.
so yes, but
Yeah.
those I wouldn't even classify as false alarms. We have
Right.
what I
Right.
like to call toothbrush VTAC, which is
Oh.
when someone is brushing their teeth and it's hitting just right on the lead where the computer thinks VTAC. I'm like, no, they're really not dying. It's fine.
they're brushing their teeth.
Yeah.
Yeah. So probably was that phenomenon something that one of the senior people told you about, or how did you discover stuff like that?
Yeah, that's definitely something that, like, someone would be that's something that happens frequently. So
Yeah.
you'll see it and you'll be like, "Oh god, what is that?" And then, be like, "Okay," like in your training, like, "Okay, here's what
Yeah.
this is. Here's how to look for and,
Yeah.
like, distinguish between actual VTAC and the toothbrush VTAC or whatever." And just, like, looking for the very subtle things. My
Yeah.
job I tell people my job is pattern recognition.
Uh.
100%.
Uh-huh.
Um, so if I'm seeing that there's a certain pattern, like I can tell, um, I've gotten to the point where, I've watched so many open heart post-ops that I can look at them and be like I'll call up the nurse and be like, "Hey, your patient's gonna go into AFib here in the next like 15 minutes or so." No way, they're not gonna do that. And then call them, 10 minutes later, "Hey, your
Yeah.
patient went into fib." What?
Yeah.
How did you know that?
So, yeah, so pattern recognition,
Mhm.
very interesting. So that though sounds like something that it took you a while to cumulatively
Yeah.
learn that. That's like deep knowledge. It's not just it's I mean,
I
maybe they told you in training that it would happen, but it's not something that you
Yeah.
can use until you've developed it yourself.
Exactly, yeah. And it takes a while. We tell people, we'll get new people on that they're like, "I'm so nervous. What if I miss something?" And it's like,
Mhm.
"Look, like you have other people here that you could be like, 'Hey, this looks weird. I don't know what this is. Can you
Right,
look at it?'" And then you get one of the people who've been here for like years.
right.
There's someone who's been here for I think she's been watching hearts for 25 plus years.
Yeah,
Like, her knowledge is incredible,
yeah,
and she's the person if I'm like, "Hey, what is this?" Because there's still
right,
stuff I don't know.
yeah.
We always
And
ask that.
and so did that person, did they sort of mentor you? Did you have someone while you were learning the job, somebody in particular who you depended upon to bring you up to speed. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's actually, currently my best friend,
Uh-huh.
so I'd be like, "Hey, I don't like, can you help me with this? I don't understand how that, like, this looks weird, I'm not 100% sure what it is, I think it's this, or I think it's this." And
Hmm.
she'd be like, "Yes, if you look at, this particular aspect of it, you know, that shows you that it is, the first thing that you were thinking." Um,
Hmm.
and she like would help me to understand like greater, so that I could, when it comes to the next time that it
Right.
happened, be like, "Oh yeah, that's that specific pattern, and that's how that works."
Right. And so you'd be spending your day, this is the main part of your day, is this monitoring.
Mhm,
And you could have the false alarm or the toothbrush,
mhm.
uh, VTAC. What does VTAC stand for, by the way?
Ventricular tachycardia.
Oh, okay. Right. And what about a situation that's not a toothbrush, but something you identify right away as a, very critical? There are probably some things which are, you have to reach them right away and they
Oh
have
yeah.
to act right away or it's all over.
Oh,
What are
definitely.
those? What are
100
those situations like?
100% of the time. So those are the times that I get very nervous because,
Yeah.
I'll see someone who goes like who they go asystole, so no heartbeat at all.
Yeah.
And like I see this, I will get on and I will try to call the nurse. And then if they're not answering within the first few times or the patient's not like coming back, because sometimes you'll have like great big pauses.
Right.
So if they're not coming back, I'll yell at my partner like, "Hey, call the charge nurse." If like we're still not getting a hold of people, we have an overhead page that we can do to make sure that people get in the room to check on the patient. Um,
Mhm.
like we have a few different backup plans basically.
Right.
Um, if like and I will call anybody on the floor if it gets
Right.
bad enough. If I'm like, I can't
But
get a hold of the nurse, I can't get a hold of the charge nurse, I'll just start calling people that I know will more likely answer.
right.
Um,
But that data, that doesn't go directly to the nurse's station
mm-mm.
as well.
Well, so it is there, but there isn't somebody at their nurse's station
They're
watching.
not monitoring it all the time. Right.
They
Yeah.
could be in another room. They could
Yeah.
be taking care of another patient. So,
So you talked about your job being, um, at the core of your job is this pattern recognition. What are the other personal qualities that you need to perform your job? Either physical, mental, emotional, judgmental. How would you describe the other personal qualities it takes to do your job?
um, we'll see. Definitely the pattern recognition. Um, being able to stay cool under pressure. Um,
Hmm.
so you can have times where, so like I said, we can watch up to 50 patients per tech at a time. So it is entirely possible that I'll have two or three patients doing things which aren't really good that I need to figure out, like, stay calm,
Hmm.
not freak out about, I've got all these people who are doing stuff that's bad. Figure out, like, okay, this one is like, this is okay for right now. Like, this is a patient whose like heart rate is high
Hmm.
versus this is a patient who is doing something that is not life sustaining.
Right.
And like prioritizing, okay, I need to call this nurse first, then I can call this nurse, then I can call this nurse.
Yeah.
And just
So
like,
you might have somebody who was having a problem, but it wasn't as dangerous as another problem, and you would have to put prioritize who to call first. Yeah.
exactly.
Now, you don't deal with the patients directly at all, do you?
Not generally. Um,
Hmm.
some very, very minor situations where like if something's going wrong with the telemetry in the room that, like, you know,
Right.
we're not getting a good read or something like that, then we'll have someone go and like troubleshoot it.
Hmm.
But our interaction like directly with the patients is pretty minimal. I would say
Right.
that, you know, a few minutes every few days kind of a thing, as opposed
Right.
to, you know, directly related.
Um, what do you enjoy or find most satisfying about your work?
Ooh. I mean, I'm very much a pattern person. So like seeing something and being like, this isn't quite what I thought it was. You
Hmm.
know, this is like the rhythm's not like there's something about it that's just a little off, not like a bad off, but like, what is this? And then like going through and like doing my measurements, looking at it from different angles, and just kind of like trying to figure out like putting it's like a puzzle, putting together the pieces like, okay, this is this piece, this is this piece. Oh, here's the overall, you know, I get everything together and like this is what the overall picture is and like understanding what is actually going on with that heart
Hmm.
as opposed to just
Hmm.
kind of having like that like I think this is what this is, but you know, like piecing it together like a puzzle.
Yeah. And what's the most challenging and difficult thing for you?
Oh, most challenging. Probably sometimes we'll have patients that they'll put on telemetry or that we're on telemetry and they should have taken off when we have what's called comfort care.
Hmm.
So that's a patient that is actively dying.
Yeah.
Um, And I would say the most challenging is really when people don't tell us like, "Hey, this patient's going on comfort care." Like,
Uh-huh.
I personally don't mind watching someone who is dying. You know, I
Hmm.
don't mind being like, "Okay," you know, and like calling and being like, "Hey, this patient has passed." But the hard thing for me is not knowing that that's what I'm looking for. So if I'm
Yeah.
seeing, you know, things that it's like, "Oh, they're dying, like, now," and trying to
Yeah.
get hold of somebody, like, thinking that this is someone who we're gonna
Yeah.
try
Yeah.
to save, like,
Right.
that's hard.
So there's no way to give you a heads up on that in a ethically or I don't know, policy wise to tell you that, oh, by the way, so and so is probably
There is,
on their way
sometimes it
out.
happens fast.
Yeah.
Sometimes, you know, people get busy doing other stuff and they you know, it just slips their mind, you know, they've got
Yeah.
a bunch of stuff to do.
Right. So, what are your relations like with your coworkers and your boss?
Uh Well, my coworkers, you know, my coworkers definitely turn to me for help both. So I'm our union rep. I work on
Mhm.
our executive board. I was a bargaining team member of this last session that we just finished. So a lot of my coworkers look up to me and like really turn to me for answers with things. Uh,
Mhm.
and you know, I had a coworker say, "You're the only person I ever want to go see HR with." You know,
Uh-huh.
um,
Yeah, that's quite a compliment, but it's
yeah,
quite a burden for you, isn't it?
yeah,
So you're basically your shop steward as well as being an
yeah.
executive board member. And do
Yep.
you handle a lot of grievances?
It comes and goes, you know, there'll be times when there's more grievances and then, you know, things kind of like we'll get things, you know, settled and then things will move on and, you know, so it
Mhm.
ebbs and it flows, but yeah, I a lot of grievances. I mine like I'm also a person that a lot of people know, so I will get not just for my unit, but I'll get calls for,
Yeah.
"Hey, can you come and do some, you know, a series of investigatory meetings for,
Yeah.
you know, we're doing like an attendance thing over in this department, and can you come and
Right.
stop for that?" Um, so I get around.
Yeah. And
Uh,
what about that? Do you push back on that? Do you have enough other stewards
we're
so that you
definitely
don't have to do all
yeah, we're
those
working on
Weingarten interviews?
training people. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a work in progress, you know,
Yeah.
trying to train some people up. I think Kevin said we had something like 25 to 30 new stewards that just came on. So,
Oh, good. Good.
it'll be some bolstering them and getting them to
Yeah.
understand, hey,
Yeah.
this is what this is. This is what this
Sure.
is. Here's how here's how you politely but firmly push back against the
Sure.
boss. You know?
Yeah. This
So
is when I was at Lurk for 30 plus years, and
yeah,
steward training was a big part of my job, and was the thing I enjoyed the most.
yeah.
Really, is working with shop stewards. So, and how about the employer? How is your relationship? How would you describe your relationship with the employer as both as a worker and as a union rep?
Um, it comes and goes. My my boss is over a couple of different departments.
Hmm.
So there'll be times when like she's transitioned to a new department. So she'll be a little bit more hands off with us. We'll have a little bit more free reign to do,
Hmm.
as we do. And then there's other times when she like tries to micromanage us.
Hmm.
Recently she was trying to say like we had to have a certain number of patients. We also on the other side of the room we also have camera patients, which I don't watch them, but they're like huge, like 65-inch TVs kind of thing
Uh-huh.
mounted in a station, and they'll have different cameras that they're watching throughout the hospitals. Um,
Okay.
so like she tried to push and say that we needed to have a certain number of patients before we could get, an additional staff member. And I was like, hey, that's not cool because, like, per policy, you can only watch a certain number of patients per, they're called telesitters. So you can only watch a certain number per telesitter, and your numbers are over that, which means that we have to break, which means that we can't all get our breaks, which is against state law. So
Right.
I had a little bit of pushback on that. And like kind of explaining like here's why this isn't okay, here's what we can do about this here, like here's my ideal world, here's what we could
Hmm.
do, kind of a thing.
So
um
there is a standard for how many patients you should be monitoring at once,
yeah.
and that's set by the state law,
That I
or is
don't
that negotiated?
I think that's more of Peace Health policy.
Yeah.
um
Okay.
and it was just
The
like,
practice.
yeah, the practice of it. So
Yeah. Um, and how would you describe the overall atmosphere at your workplace?
COVID's been hard on us. COVID
Yeah,
has
tell
been
me about
really
that.
hard. So at the first, we were, at the very beginning of COVID, there was a lot of like, you know, uh, people were like, "Oh, you guys work at the hospital. You're so awesome.
Yeah.
Everything, you're so amazing. You're doing the hard work." And now that thing, like we had the vaccine mandate, which came down, which definitely was hard for a lot of us. Peace Health does not allow any people who are unvaccinated to work.
Hmm.
I understand there's some other hospitals where if you have like you can have exemptions and still work, but Peace Health
Hmm.
is not allowed that at all. And we lost a lot of really good staff because of that, which
Hmm.
was really sad. Um,
Did you see that coming, that you were going to have a situation where your fellow workers would leave rather than get vaccinated?
I mean, I knew there would be some people, but some of the people that left, it was like, I'm surprised. Like
Yeah.
I thought, like a charge nurse that I'd worked with for years. I was surprised that she actually left.
Hmm.
Um, because it was like, she worked so hard. I loved her. She was amazing to work with. Always very like, she kind of felt like a little mama role sometimes where, like, I'm so frustrated at X, Y, and Z. And she'd sit there, she'd listen, she'd like give you, advice if that's what you were looking for, or just kind of like commiserate.
Yeah.
Um, and to see her leave, knowing that she had been there, I don't even know how long. She'd been there for decades. So to see her leave was really sad.
And are you clear about what her objections were, or was it transparent, or was it a very private matter?
I think it was more private. I
Yeah,
didn't directly talk to her about it, so
right. But now you probably had, as shop steward, you probably had lots of inquiries from people who didn't want to get vaccinated, but felt they should contend having to leave, or for that matter, members who were strongly in favor of everybody being vaccinated policy. Was that politically difficult for the union to handle the different views of the membership?
I think, yeah, it was a little hard because we have, you know, you've got the people who were the not wanting to get the vaccine weren't necessarily like hardcore anti-vaxxers.
Right,
But there are people who are like, I'm concerned about this. And I'm like, it
right.
it was, for me especially, it was hard to like meet, like, I get that you're concerned.
Hmm.
And like, also, like, I get that you're concerned, but there isn't really much that we can do.
Hmm.
Because a lot of people wanted us to, like, as a union, they wanted us to like get a lawyer and like basically sue Peace Health or sue the
Right.
state or something. And it's like, that's not a winnable case.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was really hard to get people to understand that it's
Yeah.
yeah, we could do that, but it's not something where we're going to be able to win that.
Yeah.
You
What
know?
percentage of the bargaining unit left rather than be vaccinated?
Ooh, I
Ten
don't know
percent.
that number.
Yeah.
That would definitely be. I don't think it was 10%. I know in
Less
my
than that.
department there was one person that was not wanting to, and we were able to talk to her and like kind of help her understand better, and she decided to get vaccinated. So we didn't lose anybody from my department directly, but I don't know in the other departments how many people were lost.
Was
Or
the timeline for people to have to do it, was it fair? Do you think that Peace Health dealt with the due process aspect of telling people they had to get vaccinated? Did you probably negotiated that?
uh I don't think I was directly involved with the negotiations of that because I
Hmm.
was helping to take care of my dad at the time. Um,
Hmm.
but sorry. Um, I know, let's see. The governor had mandated that everybody had to be vaccinated, I think by the end of October,
Hmm.
and Peace Health decided to move it up to be the end of September. Um, and they had told us in the beginning of August. But it was like at that point, there was still the law that we're like, hey, you can't do this because of the law. Like the law
Yeah.
says you can't force the vaccines on people.
Right.
But then Kate Brown had like said, okay, in this situation, we're gonna like, say that everybody has to, if you're a healthcare worker, you have to be vaccinated.
Hmm.
So yeah.
Now because of your limited patient contact and in limited treatment areas, I don't imagine, did you feel vulnerable yourself as far as the environment in the hospital and contracting COVID?
I mean, at towards the very beginning where, we were still learning a lot about it,
Yeah.
and we were still trying to figure out like, how exactly is this transmitted? Is this something where, because we had an entire floor that was closed off for COVID only.
Right.
So it's something like if I go and deliver a box up there, like, is there, there is some fear. Like, am
Hmm.
I going to possibly contract that? I believe the first COVID case that we actually had, they actually burned all of the linens because
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
weren't sure,
Didn't know. Right. Well, when you think back to that time,
Yeah, it was
there
scary.
was so many unknowns, and of course, treatments were not very good,
No.
and so.
it was supportive. Yeah.
Yeah. So, anything else you want to say about COVID in relationship to your job and your activism? I don't want to cut you off there. I want to move on, but it's a pretty big elephant in the room as far
It
as
is.
what's
Yeah.
everybody's workplace. I'm retired, but I am so thankful that I wasn't on the clock the last 2 years and didn't have to deal with that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
No.
How about what are the ways that your job has changed over time? Either new skills needed, new technology, more responsibility, the role of management. How
Yeah.
has your job changed? So you've been doing this job for 9 years. How would you describe the change in the job?
So I'd say, I mean, I obviously at first I bounced around a little bit trying to find like my home, my specialty. So
Hmm.
I've been a monitor tech for 7 years. But I've worked at Peace Health for 9. So there is a little bit of like, okay, where am I someone who really likes the neuro people? Am I someone, like where do I fit? Um,
Hmm.
so just in terms of that, there was like a little bit of change, but like finding, once I found my area, um, I'd mentioned earlier, we updated the system that everybody charts in. I can remember twice that we changed the system completely. Um,
Hmm.
to a completely new company, new system altogether, and having to learn that. Um, we so my job used to be on the floor. So I would be on our cardiac surgery floor watching those patients. And then I think it was 4 years ago, they actually took us off of the floors and moved us into a centralized location and gave us started adding more areas that we could watch.
So
So,
that centralization process, that only happened 4 years ago, before you were actually in the cardiac ward.
yep,
And you're closer to the patients or also in a separate monitoring area?
very close to the patients. I interacted with the patients a
Yeah,
lot more then. That
yeah,
was a lot easier too if someone was like doing something like bad and I couldn't get a hold of the nurse.
right.
There's a nurse walking by, I'd be like, "You, this room now," and they okay and
Yeah,
run.
right.
Um,
So do you miss being closer to the patients, or is it a relief not to deal with that?
I mean, so there's goods and bads. I miss more the relationship that I had with the other staff
Yeah,
and being able to be like, okay, no, just come here, let me show you what I'm talking about.
right.
No, because sometimes
So,
people be like, I think I'm seeing this, and I'd be like, you're not, let me show you. And I could
yeah,
actually pull it up and point and be like, this right here, this is this is that, this is this. Versus now I have to be like, okay, are you at a station? Can you go to a station? Can
yeah,
you pull this up? Let me show you. And it's a lot more complicated that way.
yeah.
Um,
You're more removed
yeah,
from the total team. I
yeah.
mean, there's probably efficiencies in it as far as being able to monitor more people, but there's probably also like a danger in having to monitor too many people at once. Has the number of people that you monitor gone up over time?
Um, no, so we're still stay like our 50 patients per station max has stayed.
Hmm.
Um, like I'd mentioned, it would ebb and flow, especially with COVID or like Christmas, try to get as many people home for Christmas as possible. So we'll
Yeah.
generally discharge a
Hmm.
good chunk of people and we'll have like less patients those days. But it's not gone above that 50,
Right.
it's generally stayed like high 30s to low 40s is generally where we sit.
Right. And so you 9 years at River Bend, were you at the old Sacred Heart before that?
I was not.
Okay, so when you started in your career, you started at River Bend,
Yep.
and were saying that you used to live in Eugene and you moved to Springfield.
Yep.
Um, we talked a little bit about your role in the union. I want to ask you a little bit more about that. We're getting close to the end here.
Yep.
How was it you first got involved with SAAU?
So I was actually when I started, we did not have a union.
Mm-hmm.
And it was interesting. So I was living with my mom at the time. We both worked at Sacred Heart, obviously. And I didn't really know much about unions. I would have been 25 or so
Mm-hmm.
when our union was like forming. So like all I had really known about unions was what I'd learned in school, which was more of a unions were necessary, but in the past.
Right. Yeah.
It's not a thing now. We don't need that now. So like that's kind of like the messaging that I had. And then I'd gotten a lot of the boss messaging of like, this isn't necessary, we're a family, that kind of stuff. And initially I was actually not for our union because I did not understand what it actually was.
Right. Now you went to high school in Eugene.
Yes, I went to Willamette High School.
You went to Willamette, okay. And neither your mom, your dad, and your mom worked at Riverbend, but it was before it was unionized.
So my dad worked at University District.
Yeah.
He was an RN, so he was there when like the RNs were unionized, and he'd kind of said like that it was okay, but not that it was like, yes, this is a thing that you guys need to do.
Mm-hmm.
Like this will be really good for you. He was like, yeah, it was good, but never
He
really.
he wasn't an activist or anything.
No, not at all. He was very just rank and file, like, but yeah. So once, our union efforts, like we got our union and I started seeing like some of the changes and like actually understanding what it meant to be in a union, I was like, oh, this is cool. I want to be a part of this.
Right. Now, remind me what year the union election was over there.
I
Was it
want
like
to
5 years ago?
No, because I want to say it was 2015. So 7 years.
2015.
Yeah.
Okay. And so what was your first so when it was organized and you got your first contract, you weren't active in the very beginning.
No. I was like I would say I was like pretty like neutral about it. Like I wasn't sure if I wanted this. It was like, okay, we got this. Let's just kind of see what happens, Still at a point in my life where I was like, it could easily like I wasn't making great money. It wouldn't have been like a hardship for me to go work somewhere else or anything. It was like,
Right.
it doesn't work out.
Well, what was it to change your mind then?
Definitely like seeing, so obviously we got great great wage increases. There we go. I can speak. And like and seeing more of like the power that we had together. Just like getting some of the stuff that like nurses had. So like 6 in consecutive. If you work more than 6 days in a row, then everything after your 6th day is overtime.
Right.
That wasn't something we had. And just like constantly having to like fight with your manager to, get paid appropriately and, just being very confused about stuff, to actually like having people who are like, no, this is not okay. This is not how this is supposed to be. And like making sure that things are set up correctly. So, we are more protected. We are, like, hey, that's not okay. It's not okay how that manager is talking to you. Like, I'm going to stand with you and, like go with you to be like, hey, this isn't okay. And just like having that collective power helped me to see like, okay, here's some, like some good changes that I'm seeing. And made me like, okay, I want to be more involved with this. So became a steward, started getting more involved, came, friends with the organizer at the time, and was kind of chatting with them. I was like, I think I want to try for being the executive board.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, okay, I totally support this. If you want to do this, let's get you up to Portland for some external organizing.
Mm-hmm.
So I went up to our union hall up there. I think I was there for 2 or 3 weeks, helping to organize other hospitals. And oh my God, I can remember one person that I was talking to, that she was a patient registration person.
Mm-hmm.
And like, she was telling me what it was like to work at her hospital. And I was like,
Right.
that's terrible. That's not okay. And like, kind of explaining to her, the union difference. Like, that's where I was. Look,
Right.
this is how it can be better. And just kind of like seeing her face going from like looking around, like, I'm not supposed to be talking to these people, to like, oh no, this is good. And like, kind of like that hope.
Right. Having hope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was huge.
Yeah.
And yeah, I loved that feeling.
So the experience with organizing, it sounds like that was very galvanizing for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. It usually is for people. I was an organizer of garment workers in the South in Alabama, and it was, it was like a life-changing experience to have those discussions. We didn't win a lot either.
Yeah. I imagine in Alabama it's a little hard.
It was pretty hostile, but it was that experience of people saying, "Oh, life could be different."
Yeah.
It's powerful stuff.
Yeah.
Very interesting. And then, so you were also on the negotiating team last time.
Yes, I was on our negotiating team.
How was that experience? So how was that? What did you learn from that?
Gosh, my sister had been on the previous negotiating teams, and she kept telling me, like, I'd be like, Lori, I'm so frustrated. They keep, we'll be like, okay, we want to like increase this. Like, we want to increase our weekend differential. And no, we just contract language. And she said, Rachel, they say no, 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 no until they say yes. You just have to keep asking and keep, so that was really like, there's parts of it that were really disheartening, because it was, they keep saying no. Why are, like, we should be further along than this. I feel like we're not getting places.
Yeah.
And then, it's the baby steps before the huge, run.
Right.
And we had
takes a bit of patience on your part as a negotiator, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Now the membership don't often understand that, do they?
Definitely don't. Yeah. And I am the moderator, or I'm the admin on our group Facebook page. So I was dealing with a lot of the like, why isn't this done already? Peace
Right.
off, because they were just sending emails saying like, we wanted to start this earlier. We would be done by now if they would just accept our shitty raises.
Yeah.
No, we're not accepting 1%. We're not accepting 2% raises. Inflation is 10%. This is nothing. And just kind of like helping people to understand like what it was, like how the actual process works. was interesting. It was challenging. We're going through that right now, because like normally our contracts, like, or normally we've had 3 we've done.
Right.
So our past 2, they've been done in the summer, and then our wage increases come in October. So this one we didn't finish until, I don't remember the exact date, but like the 1st of November. And got it ratified. Well, obviously that was after when we would normally get our October raises. So we told people we're going to be getting back pay, but it's taking Peace Health a lot longer to do that kind to like get that instated and get all that stuff, and people are very upset. They're like, why don't I have my money now? And I'm like, if it was in my pocket, I would give it to you.
Mhm.
It's not me. It's, it's
Yeah.
them that's taken a long time. So
So it's a retroactive
yeah.
increase that hasn't come through yet, yeah. But you're the person who they complain to about it.
Yep.
That's a challenge. But it clearly you get more out of it than it takes out of you, or you wouldn't keep doing it.
Yeah. There's times when it's been like, maybe I need to like step back. Um,
Mhm.
but then, I remember, doing we're doing our ratification vote, and I ended up being one of the people that was like showing people what their increases would be, and just so many people just being like, this is going to make a huge difference,
Yeah,
and just being like, right, that's why I'm doing this.
right. Yeah,
you know when things are getting hard, I try to remember the people that are like, oh my god, this is going to make such a huge difference for me.
yeah,
Like, that's why I'm doing this.
yeah. One last question for you. This has been great. I've learned a lot about your job, and that's always interesting to me. Being a labor educator for 40 years, I just was fascinated by learning about what people did, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
So, looking at your job or looking back at on your career, do you have any additional reflections or observations about what the work meant to you and its impact on your life, or what the unions meant to you and its impact on your life?
Hmm. I'd have to say, I mean, with especially the union going from being, unsure, leaning towards not wanting our union, to, I mean, obviously I am very positive, very like pro union, just like beyond that, the being in the union and like having all these experience has increased my confidence
Hmm.
so much. Like, I I'm not when I started out, I was what, 22, turning 23 when I first got my job at Peace Health, and I was very unsure of myself. Like, you know, I didn't want to rock the boat. I didn't want to do anything that would potentially get me into into any kind of trouble.
Hmm.
Um, so I was the quiet person who like didn't complain about anything, even though there was stuff that needed to be complained about. And just being in the union and like learning learning more about like what is good and what isn't good, and like being able to step up not just for myself but for others, and being like, no, this isn't okay. And like having the confidence to step forward and say, this isn't okay, that's not how we're doing things. You absolutely will not bully this person into doing something that they feel uncomfortable doing. That is not okay.
Hmm.
And just being that person, like, that's probably the biggest thing that I've got. And that's something that, even if I don't know, I'm not leaving, but like even if like Peace Health burned down right now and I had to go find another job, like having that confidence is something that's going to stick with me for the rest of my life.
Right.
So,
Great. Well, that's a really good way to end this interview. So, well, thank you so much.
yeah,
I appreciate it. I need to send you like a release form so that
okay,
I could use this,
of course.
which I have to figure out how to do that. Whether I might send it to you as an electronic form and just have you sign it and send it back to me, but I haven't decided how to do that yet.
Okay.
There will be, this exhibit is going to be open on February 10th, assuming we get all the interviews done. We're starting to roll with them. So I'll let you know more about what's happening with that. We'll invite people to come and,
Ooh, and
hopefully
that's my
have
day
some.
off.
Yeah.
February 10th is a day off, so I can definitely
Oh, excellent. Okay. Well, great to meet you, Rachel, and
meet you.
good luck on the job.
Thank you.
See you later.
Bye.